When we talk about mobilizing for peace, it's important to define and acknowledge the power dynamics that are inspired by race, even when we're talking about disability, maybe especially so. This is part one of three parts of our discussion with Keith Jones. I'm Annette Bourbonnier from Nothing Without Us, Stories and Discussions of Meaningful Inclusion. I am a 70-ish-year-old woman with dark-rimmed eyeglasses. I'm wearing a red and black shirt with a paisley print, and I'm sitting in a power wheelchair. So please take the time to free subscribe if you've not already done so. Give me a like, make some comments. I do read all the comments. So this afternoon, I am really happy to have Keith Jones coming back to talk with me. We've got a mess in this world, and we're talking about how can we, as a population, and that includes everybody in this country,
Right.
start mobilizing for peace. And let's see what we do about that. Keith, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah. So, yeah, we do have a real mess in this country right now, and peace is definitely getting to be a more and more distant possibility. But I thought, and I'm sure you've had thoughts along this line. Let me read you some statistics that will tell you where I'm going.
Okay.
Okay, persons with disabilities are 25% of the population. People of the Latino and Hispanic community, 20% of the population.
hmm
The Black community, Black and brown skin, 14.5% of the population. The LGBTQ community, 9%. Asians, 7%. Indigenous peoples, 3%. Now, even, even accounting for the intersectionality in all of this,
hmm
we should be the most powerful force on the planet, and especially
Yeah.
in this country. And I think we have to start looking at it this way.
hmm
The the very privileged, white, cisgendered, heterosexual, able-bodied Christian male
hmm
is the minority,
hmm
and we have to actually take charge as a group. Every one of those populations I named,
hmm
if we work together in an inclusive manner, we have a power, we have a
Yeah.
voice, we are
Absolutely.
strong.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That I have a tagline where, I usually post it. It says we are not a fully realized movement
Right,
until we are a fully inclusive movement.
right,
That is never not the case. And the numbers that you pointed out, you talk about where do we go from here as an organizer or the person who does this, whether it's a disability or race or whatever.
right,
One of the things that America has historically done, particularly for shifting of power,
right,
is there's no adage. Power concedes nothing without a struggle or a demand.
right,
So the populations that you named, particularly if you're talking about the disability community, well, one of the things that we in the disability community have to acknowledge is the same thing that the country has to acknowledge,
yes,
that there is a power dynamic that is fueled by the concept of race, which is fueled by the need of a white superiority dominance, particularly by the men that you described. This is
yeah,
not hyperbolic. Like we are
no,
launching this, we're launching missiles at countries. So the question then becomes for people here in the United States, which has always been the question.
right,
Are you willing to give up your proximity to that thing which we call whiteness, which in this structure America has a codified racial caste system that's ambiguous and amorphous, but very well understood and adhered to. Because if
right,
that was the case, we would do this. Now, how do we form a coalition of the groups that you just mentioned? One is we have to acknowledge, you can't solve a problem that you refuse to acknowledge. So if the disability community is like, well, no, we're not talking about racism, we're talking about ableism, then how can I
They're first cousins.
right? Well, a matter of
Actually,
you
they're one and the same. The
that
intersectionality is real.
then yes, and you don't get the term ableism without you talking about you are discriminated against based on your disability as framed under
Right.
the ADA, which is framed on the civil rights movement. So
There
for
you
you
go.
to say to anybody with disabilities that you are against ableism, but you're still homophobic. I don't want ableism, but I'm
Yeah.
still anti-black. I don't like immigrants coming to this country, but I don't want people to. So,
Yeah. Right. Then we go like, oh, whoa.
so
Yeah.
yeah. So I think what you said and the power. We are the ones who we've been waiting for, and I think what for the disability community specifically is that they're going to have that proverbial coming to Jesus moment. And
Yeah.
I, as a person who's been in this for whatever kind of capacity, for whatever, I I don't know if people are ready. Well, I told you last time, people ain't
Yeah.
serious. I look, there's something to the I'm on your podcast. This is sexy, and a lot of people like this because this is sexy. But when you get off of this podcast and you do the work that you do, and I'm off of this podcast and I do the work that I do, that is not sexy. And that does not get you likes and clicks. It gets you put on lists where you don't get that invite. You don't get that grant. You don't, it puts you, and that's where building, how do we get to peace is people acknowledging that there is a cost to your comfort and to your, like, there's a real cost to this. And it's not, yeah, it's cool that you got clapped, but are you willing to be the unpopular person in
Right.
order to get liberation? And
Right.
that
And we have to. And we have to. When I take top stock of my own self periodically, like, okay, let's make sure I am who I'm trying to say I am.
right, right,
And I do, and I make sure, and I said, it, and I look at my relationships with a lot of different people, and then conclude, yeah, I'm okay with this. This is who
right,
I am.
right,
I
right.
am this person, and I am genuinely this person. But there is an emotional toll to it, especially if you are like me and like you, speak out.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
start saying, yeah, I've got this banner, this banner, this banner, and this banner, and I'm
right,
comfortable with all these banners. What are you going to do about it? And when you speak out like that, yeah, and I've had some real issues over it, but I look at it as that is their problem. Now, once in a
yes,
while, I have to take a break and decompress because the emotional toll can be significant, and I recognize that in myself. And I take a break and just not like months long break, but
right,
take a breather and take the time to reassess. And yes, these are my real values, and I move forward. And I know other people like this.
yes,
To the people I'm drawn to. I mean, one of my closest friends, was telling me about a gas station near her. And, the guy that owns it looks like the typical white Yankee,
yeah,
right? But he has a big sign that says, no one's illegal on stolen land.
yeah,
And he is open, he hires people from, all races, walks of life, and he is open to this. And and it's in a particular area where it's pretty refreshing to see.
right,
Um, and so we talk about this sometimes. I mean, because we talk about this amongst ourselves as well. I have my circle of friends, and we do talk about it because we care about who's coming up next.
Right.
Of course, my daughter is about your age. Um, so we're close. I think about that, yeah. And but I have a grandson. I have grandsons. I have four grandchildren, one, and they're all in their 30s. So I think about them and their children. God,
Yeah.
I am getting old. This is like too many generations ago. Don't tell anybody. But but I do care that
Right.
strongly. And when I see people with disabilities say, that's not really disabled, or I'm more disabled, I think,
Yeah, yeah,
what? No,
yeah,
no, 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 no. We can't afford to do that. We have to be at least aligned and unified in our voices, in our approach,
yes.
because that is society's way of making us weaker by fueling differences.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, it's when you talked about it, and it's a funny thing. So you can break it up into two components. So on a sociological term and in terms of a movement,
Right.
there are dynamics that whether there's whole academic studies about
Mhm.
movement psychology and what are the natures and things of that, and how post movement those people who are in it behave or act, or what led to the ending of the what led to the ending of the ERA movement. What happened to everybody who was, we were the feminist movement. But
Yeah.
then if you talk to feminists who are not white, they're like, well, the white women wanted white women stuff, and they wanted to be white women, right? It's the same thing with the suffrage movement. If you talk about disability, disability has never been multicultural, but at this moment, the 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 reason I'm unambiguously optimistic, but I'm also a realist. I'm
Yeah.
like, people are like, there is something to be said about getting notoriety and fame, particularly in a community or at a level when you've been ostracized and put outside the circle. But if you're talking about effective movements to where the end goal is achieved, and the end goal and achieved, like you posted this question, is how does America get out of this? America has had the blueprint written down from the Kerner Commission since 1968.
Yeah.
So every reflexive move when you talk about the 70s going into the 80s, and
Hmm.
the reason you shifted from the Carter to a Reagan was not because Carter was that bad, was because Reagan spoke a very specific language to a very specific subset of America.
Yeah.
All of those numbers. Black
Yeah.
America, black folks in America, not black migrants, but black folks in America are
Hmm.
12.9% of the population.
Right.
That percentage of the population is at that percentage, and you add on the 3.1% of the indigenous people.
Yeah.
That 15% of the population
Right.
is at the core and the epicenter of every law,
Yeah.
every land disposition, every
Yeah.
environmental law, where you can and cannot put buildings, where you can and cannot dump your waste, where you can, like all of those things.
Oh, yeah.
And right. And so when you say to the disability community, how do you coalesce and form an allyship and a partnership with the LGBTQIA plus community, with the trans community, with the indigenous? How do you talk about disability and sovereignty and indigeneity? How do you talk about land back and sovereign governance? What does it look like in a capitalist system that is not predicated upon your body function, but your ability
Yeah.
to put into us all of those things? But what that does do is that takes you out of the spotlight, that makes you have to do work, and you don't get to be shiny on red carpets, because the work to do that environmental policy is grunt work. The work to do that is
Okay.
getting is that work to do that is who are our politicians that we're training to run for office that are not going to sell you wolf tickets and say, oh my God, Annette, here's my position on disability and people living in the community, and I need your vote. And the moment you put them in office, they're talking about, well, we don't need healthcare anymore, right? So it's really it's for our community,
Yeah.
we have to decide on is our humanity and our common goals of liberty, justice, and equity more important than clinging to our privilege.
Thank you for listening to part one of my discussion with Keith Jones on beginning the mobilization for peace by acknowledging how race, gender, disability, and all the other isms are affected by the original American power dynamic. I have put a short description about the Kerner Commission in the notes because it does get is referred to. And please join us for part two where we talk about equity, privilege, and the big picture. If you like what I'm doing here, please subscribe. You can subscribe for free, but there are some additional benefits for paid memberships, including early access to some episodes and access to some special episodes only for members. So don't forget to leave me a like, make some comments, and tell your friends. They can find this podcast at patreon.com/nothingwithoutus, and we will soon be back up on YouTube and Spotify. So join us in the next part of the discussion with Keith, where we examine the effects of equity and privilege, as well as the big picture on political activism. So until the next Nothing Without Us, this is Annette.